Hello and welcome to another edition of Real Life Renos, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Karen Brown, and today we are doing a follow-up to the series that we started last week about accessibility and house hunting and the sorts of things we ought to look for. And today we are going to look at the actual house hunting piece. And our guest, of course, is Mr. Ron Wickman, who is a barrier-free specialist in the architectural field, and he joins us from Edmonton. Welcome back, Ron.
Thanks so much.
So we want to talk about house hunting and really the basic challenges that anyone faces when looking for a home are centered around affordability and what community you want to live in. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So affordability is the biggest issue, right? So I've spent a long career now working with clients who are looking for homes, and they really want something first and foremost to meet their budget, and then secondly they want to live in a community that provides for their specific needs. They might have school-age children. They might want to be near their work, that sort of thing.
Right. And when we add in the complication around the need for accessibility, that can be quite a challenge for some people.
Yeah, no pun intended, but the challenge gets ramped up. Yeah. It does, for sure. First and foremost, again, most people with disabilities aren't in the same income bracket as even your average family. So we're already starting at a bit of a deficit from that end of things, and then finding something that you could either renovate or find a lot to build new. Finding an existing house that would already meet your needs as somebody with a disability is next to impossible.
Right. But that doesn't mean that people should be discouraged by it, because there are solutions to mitigate all kinds of issues, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But what else should people be looking at in terms of what they need in a house? Like, I'm thinking they should be looking at their needs not only today, but down the road.
Right. Yeah. So again, even your most typical average family without any member with a disability tend to look at the here and now. So we tend to focus on what can we afford now. Definitely, in North America, I can speak a bit more confidently about growing up in Canada and being in North America, that we have a tendency to buy for what we can afford today, and then we think about what we could afford later. And it's not uncommon for us to think that in our lifetime we'll probably move 3 or 4 times. And that's just kind of the way we think, and that's a normal situation. And the idea of building homes that you could grow in, homes that are flexible to accommodate your changing needs, is not something that's really in our kind of DNA as North Americans.
Right. The changing need piece is quite important with the cost of housing escalating the way it is. Do you think that we need to be looking at houses that will do us for longer, that maybe we can look at the community and our lives and where our lives might go and look at how the house might change to meet our needs in the years ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny, it's just as you ask that question, I'm thinking, all the way back to when I started my practice in 1994, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they held a competition which they called Flex Housing. So the economy wasn't super strong, and CMHC is an organization that tries to promote innovative housing. And they were taking this opportunity to encourage designers and builders to come up with clever ideas that would adapt to changing households and sort of a new demographic. And they came up with this competition which they called Flex Housing. It's a term that you can, if you go to the CMHC website, You can look it up, and they talk about housing that is adaptable, affordable, and accessible. And in 1994, I had just become registered as an architect, and I entered the competition. And the idea of adaptability wasn't really about accessibility. That was a separate category. Adaptability was speaking in terms of more, again, in 1994, more and more people were working out of their home. More and more children in their late 20s, 30s even, weren't moving out of their family home.
Shudder. Now they go away, but they come back.
Yeah, and parents of adults in their 50s and 60s were moving back into the into a home. So this whole idea of a multi-purpose house, multi-generational house, was talked about way back when. And my not to get into too many details, but my particular competition entry was one where it took my own family as the idea that I was working out of the house. We had 3 small children, so I thought, well, my wife and I could afford a kind of starter home. So could we buy a small home that could accommodate our needs? And then as potentially the family grew, and changing needs, like, again, thinking about kids that aren't moving out, parents that are moving back in, having home office, you could start to add on to your house slowly. And in fact, what happened with my design was the idea that this couple that buys the house in the beginning could then separate the house into 2, not physically separate them, but have a wall between the two parts of the house, and then they could have like a rental suite. So that couple could buy the house in 1994 and continue to live in the house in 2023, but they would have like a rental unit or a unit for a child, again, that is at home, or a parent that's at home. So all of a sudden, there's all these kind of really cool, flexible ideas, and I was really excited about it. I was just out of school. I had lots of, I thought, innovative ideas, a lot of energy, and I was kind of naive to the market and how it actually worked and what really moved people to buy houses that they do. And then just one last thing, the house was open to the public for a month, and this is kind of back to my point about our thinking about living in homes for the long term. Many people approached me, and we talked about the house as this idea of living in it for your entire life. And if it was just one person that mentioned it, I wouldn't have thought much of it. But so many people said to me, well, that's just not the way it works. You don't buy a house and continue to adapt it and build on it and separate it and have all this flexible space. You just move. So you buy into a community that's for young families, starter homes. Then you can move into the community or neighborhood where there's homes that have children. And then you move to a retirement village. So this idea that we just constantly move is just something that's ingrained in our DNA, the way we are as buyers. And I just think that's such a sort of unusual way of thinking. And I think it is now in 2023, people are really starting to think about this idea of this flex housing again in a big way.
I agree. And your house plan would probably find greater favor now. But as you were speaking, I was thinking, if everybody's moving into a neighborhood with young children, the young children all grow up together and everybody is at the same stage of life altogether. So even what they were saying to you doesn't kind of make sense to me. Everybody, like, why would you move to another neighborhood when the neighborhood you're in is already at your same life stage, more or less? That's what they were thinking. That's fine. That's fine.
And the only time, and especially today now that we've lived through this pandemic, the only time you really don't want to move, is when you are, in your late 70s, 80s, because the next option, this long-term healthcare, is not not desirable by anybody. So everybody just wants to stay in their home. And again, the problem is you didn't have the idea or thinking, 30 years prior or 40 years prior to build a house that you could actually live in when you were in your 80s. And so now this house has multiple levels and stairs everywhere. Spaces are cramped. You just can't really adjust your house to fit your new needs as somebody who is aging.
And they're building on 33-foot lots. It's really challenging. So if you were looking for your first house now, knowing what you know now, but going back to that younger age when you were first looking for a house, how would that change your search for a house?
Well, that's a great question, because ideally I know what I would do, but the practicality of finding the right lot, I guess I would try to find a vacant lot that I could build a house on that would allow me to design and build something that I would accommodate my family's needs for now and way into the future. But there really aren't neighborhoods that are designed with that sort of mentality or that thinking. And so the reality, I think and now I'm speaking very specifically about Edmonton, which I think could translate into many other cities, Calgary for sure. I happen to live in a neighborhood that is still considered a mature neighborhood, but it was built on big lots. So we have a 50-foot wide lot, 130 feet deep. So it's quite a substantial lot. We have a fairly big front yard. We had a bungalow on the house when we bought it. Not a bad sized backyard. So it's a house that we could do a lot of things with in terms of renovating. Mm-hmm. And we did do a renovation in 2000. And I'm glad that we did then. At the time I thought maybe if I wait a few years, prices will come down.
No.
That really never happens. It just always keeps going up. So, we did something that today I just simply couldn't afford. It would just be well over $1 million to do the renovation, and it would be sort of dumb to even try to keep any part of the house. We just tear it down and start over. But, we did design something we added a second story to the house. And then I took all my learning from school and my experience up until 2000, to design a house that I felt I could have now and forever more. And that's proving to be true. That we now have a house that my wife and I can stay in as long as we want. It'll meet all our needs as we age. But more than that, it's a house that has become flexible for not a shrinking family, but a growing one. So our kids are having children of their own. So we're at three children, 3 grandchildren, 2 more on the way. So surprisingly, I never thought I would say this, but I'm planning a small addition again to the front part of our house, and just to get a little bit more space, because now everybody's coming over here for Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that sort of stuff. And the reason that we meet here is because the house is so accommodating and flexible. The kids can come easily. There's no steps at the front door, so they can just push their baby carriages in. There's lots of space to leave stuff around. We have 4 bedrooms upstairs. So this house it has been sort of custom fit for us. But the reality is, it's a great house for so many families and so many different types of living arrangements.
Just to refresh people's memories from our previous podcast, you did the step-free entry renovation largely because of your father's needs. Your father was in a wheelchair and wasn't able to access your house without a great deal of difficulty. And so now we see the needs that he had, matching the needs that your children and your grandchildren have in terms of how to get into a house quickly, easily, safely, and with as little hassle as possible. Isn't that remarkable? We talk in terms of accessibility, and it's not accessibility, really. It's life. It's doing life and having a house that meets our needs.
That's such a fantastic point, right? Because it's so true. And talking about our marketplace, you use that term accessible in real estate, and you try to sell your house as one that's accessible. I can almost guarantee that that's going to cause you grief, and people are going to think that it's something other than what it is. So coming up with the right term, or the right way to market accessible housing, again, I'm saying that word, is quite vital. Unless we get enough people understanding what accessibility truly means, right?
Right.
But yeah, I'm at the point now where it's no longer me talking about things in the abstract. I'm experiencing them as I go, and I'm not going to lie. It's really nice to be 58 now and feel like when I was in my late 20s and 30s, I was actually making some kind of sense.
Yes.
I was saying something that actually meant was meaningful, and it's coming to be true, right? And so, in those days I was often, people would often say I was a little bit ahead of my time maybe, and I'm not the only one. There's lots of people out there, but it's nice to know that you were on the right track, and I really felt like in those days that these are good ideas. These are really, really valuable ideas. And again, it's sometimes frustrating when you see what's being built compared to what could be done, and how much better it could be. Yet somehow we haven't really infiltrated enough the current market to make a real effective dent in the market.
Right. You touched on the language that is used to market houses, but there is language that is used with builders and with realtors, as well as the home buying public, and it doesn't always meet up. People aren't always understanding the same things from the conversations. So I want to let our listeners know that we are going to touch on language and the differences in the words and the terms as we move forward. In fact, we're going to follow this podcast with 3 other short podcasts on specific areas of a house that you might want to look at, and we'll maybe have a more in-depth conversation about language with those. So as an architect, Ron, architects are not typically chosen to ride around with the general public and find houses, but if in fact I hired you to help me find the right house, knowing that renovations might be needed or would be needed, what would you be looking for?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, I just, again, back to the terminology, there's 3 key words that I also want to bring into the conversation, and that is choice, change, and adapt.
Okay.
And those 3 words are really important. And what I mean by adapt is I grew up with a parent who used a wheelchair, and he always had to adapt to the built environment the way it was. So it was never designed for him. It was always designed almost against him. And so he had to figure out ways to make it work. And obviously that had a tremendous influence on myself growing up as a child, seeing this for myself and just knowing that there's something terribly wrong about all of that. And that sort of led me to when I went to architecture school and I started working on my master's thesis. That led me to this word choice. And when it comes right down to it, my dad and others, everybody just wants to have the ability to make their own choices. And this does relate to us looking for houses and house hunting.
Right.
And what influences often our decision making is our ability to look at change as a positive or negative thing. So how we think about change is something that does affect us in terms of us looking for homes. So with that in mind, when I am asked to talk to people or give my 2 cents about what they should be looking for in houses, the first thing I would say is look for a bungalow if you can. So the choices are somewhat limited. There are less and less bungalows being built today, so you probably are looking in older neighborhoods for bungalows. They generally cost a little bit more money. So again, that's sort of limiting your choices. Secondly, I would say stay away from anything that's like a bi-level or a split level. So right away, kind of on the 2 sides of the spectrum, one is the bungalow being the best and the worst being the split level or bi-level.
Right.
And then your 2-story house is in between that. So a 2-story house is often a house that can be quite easily adapted as well. So,
and see, people don't think that. People see a 2-story house and think, "Ooh, can't do that."
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They automatically think that that's going to be a problem. So generally speaking, the big thing I say is, when you're first house hunting, and let's say you target a neighborhood that you really like, and you just go for a walk or a drive and start looking at houses. The first thing I tell people to do is just look at that relationship of the entry floor level to the ground. So if you look at it and you see that it's less than 2 feet, 600 millimeters, I don't know what language I should be speaking in when it comes to dimensions. For younger people, I guess, in metric. But yeah, so if it's around 2 feet, which again in older neighborhoods you'll see quite often, that's a pretty positive thing. That's reason to at least venture into the house and see what it looks like from there.
So if the front door is 2 feet off of the ground or less, this is positive. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you see a house and it's got 10 steps to the front door, just keep going.
Right.
Don't even think about it really. Now, having said that, the problem is for a lot of people with disabilities, they don't always have that choice, right? Sometimes they have to buy a house like that because it just happens to be the only one that would fit their budget.
Right.
And then they realize, well, you know what? It's going to have to be. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this without doing some sort of addition to the house and adding a new entry that would allow us to have an elevator in there, and so there's all kinds of ramifications to that relationship of the ground to the entry floor level. Right.
I'm a big believer that people should be able to have the dignity of entering through the front door. I also understand that that's not always possible, and that's the situation that you just mentioned. If there are a bunch of steps up to the porch, you might have to have a lift off of the garage or some other sort of accommodation to make that happen.
Yeah, so I just reminded me of something. I guess I'll just say it now, but you know this word dignity. I grew up at a time when that was a tricky word for my dad, right? So just to share with you an example of his dignity going to friends' homes, there was a reason why he always liked having people come to his house,
right?
Because he could use his house quite easily. So first thing we would do going to a family member's home would be me trying to get him up the stairs. So he would be approaching the stairs from the back, so I would grab the handles in the back of his wheelchair. He would grab the wheels of his wheelchair, and he would be trying to propel himself up as I was pulling on him. So any slight letting go or whatever, he's going flying down. Like he's not hanging on to anything other than the wheels of his wheelchair.
Right.
And we do live in a winter city, so sometimes we were doing this in icy conditions and so on. So first and foremost, just even getting into the house is not super dignified. And secondly, once we're at that level, just navigating through the house to get to a table that we can sit and have coffee at, or maybe dinner even, that, that's probably moving furniture around, getting things out of the way, all that kind of stuff. There's no thought about getting to any other level. So, people could go downstairs, but my dad couldn't, or upstairs if it was a 2-story. And then the worst was if he stayed long enough and he had to use the bathroom, it was more often than not, it was him literally sitting in his wheelchair in the hallway, peeing in a cup, and me pouring it in the toilet, or my mom pouring it in the toilet for him. So he couldn't even get in the washroom. And so, in time, we found that my dad just became more and more resistant to going out and visiting, and stayed at home and had people come visit him, because that just doesn't work, right? And today, I think people would find that hard to believe that that's kind of what you used to do, right?
It's still what people have to do. I mean, when you look at a dignity issue and you look at the houses that are being built on lots with 33-foot frontage, they are all straight up. And a lot of areas seem to be addicted to these porch communities. So there are many, many stairs getting up. So, that is what you and your father and your mother dealt with. It is still what people are dealing with. So, this is good. If people are looking at not only their own needs, but the needs of people who may come and visit them, parents who are aging, the fact that they might have strollers, or, as we discussed in the last podcast, everybody seems to have these, Cadillac strollers these days. They're almost cars of their own, I think you said, and that's true. So just the whole business of getting into a house, we take for granted all of these stairs, and this is just how we do it. It's not the easiest thing in the world, and it is not how we should do it.
Yeah, that's exactly. And depending on my day, frankly, I often feel like we've come a long way since I was born in 1964, and sometimes when I'm helping somebody find a house to modify or renovate, I still feel like we're sort of back in the Stone Age or something, that we just haven't really made much progress at all. So I try to stay positive in all of this, and we slowly make progress, but it just seems agonizingly slow,
right?
To make that progress. And just thinking about that too, the idea of influencing our decision making and choices that we have to find homes comes down to this understanding of the built environment and how well the built environment exists to allow people with disabilities to get around. So in a previous podcast, we talked about curb cuts and how that's changed the very nature of the way we get around in our urban environments. And so again, the no-step entrance, the entrance that's easy for somebody in a wheelchair, and we've demonstrated and talked about the fact that it benefits so many other people, young families with baby carriages and so on. So that just kind of taking on the sort of normal way we build should be happening. And we're still not there yet, but slowly getting there. I think what is really helping homebuyers is technology. So they, with more and more technology now, they can better find out what their options are, through Googling and all this other ways of doing things. So their search becomes a bit more broad and easy. But at the same time, it's got to be done by people that know things. So that would be sort of the third thing that's really important, is that people with disabilities need to be able to engage with people that know what they're talking about. So
right.
If you're looking for a house and you type in houses that are accessible, and you might get a whole list of things that come up, or houses that come up. And I know, having gone through that experience, that often there's like somebody's put a piece of plywood on the stairs and they've called it accessible. So,
right.
So careful what you call accessible, and that just turns people off too, right? They just sort of see, well, that's what accessibility is, and I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. The other thing too is when you're house hunting and you see homes that have been adapted to at least make the entrance accessible, and you've got 6 stairs or more, what you often see is a big wooden ramp not typically professionally designed or anything, landscaped or anything like that. So you just have like your friends and family, your neighbors that have helped you build this ramp, this wooden ramp that frankly often looks terrible, And again, that's our impression of what accessibility is. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a big challenge that way. But you can start to see that as you learn more. You can start to see that certain neighborhoods were designed, mostly with bungalows or mostly with 2 stories or bi-levels or split levels. So you can, with the use of technology, you can start to target the areas that you think would be good to live in. And I am talking about looking for homes that you can purchase and then renovate, right? So the
right.
whole issue of new housing is a whole nother discussion.
Right. Okay, so let's pretend we have found a lovely neighborhood and there is something of a selection of bungalows where the entry door is 2 feet or less off the ground. What's the next thing you're going to look for?
So once I get inside the house, then I look at, first thing I look at are the stairs. So let's say it's the bungalow. So I would look at how the stairs work. And I know we'll be talking about this more in detail, but generally I'm just going to look for a set of straight stairs, straight down to the basement level.
Right.
So if I see curved stairs or anything with a 90 degree or 180 degree turn, then I know those stairs will be hard to adapt for anybody using a wheelchair.
Okay, so if we haven't been able to find the bungalow, if we have found a 2-story house, same thing. You're looking for the same thing, straight stairs.
That's right. Yeah, and then if you find a nice 2-story house that you really like, then you're looking at a spot. Or you're looking at the stairs to see how easy they are to adapt. And absolutely, at a very general level, the thing you want to look at is just what's the run of those stairs. So a straight run of stairs is what you look for. And generally, beyond that, you need to see that there's lots of space at the bottom of the stairs, up to 10 feet. So if you get to the bottom of the stairs and then you have to do a sharp left or right, then that's a problem as well. So you need lots of space at the bottom of the stairs and lots of space at the top of the stairs. And that will be able to accommodate a lift. You're
talking about a stair lift or a chair lift, depending on how...
I'm sorry, yeah, a stair lift, yeah.
Right.
And there's two types of stair lifts, and we can get more into this at another time, but one would accommodate somebody sitting on the chair. That's probably what we're used to seeing in commercials. The other is what they call a stair platform lift. So it's an actual platform that folds up against the wall and folds down. You wheel onto it on your wheelchair, and it takes you down the incline of the stairs or up the incline of the stairs.
Right. Okay, so if we've got a 2-story house and the staircase isn't exactly what you need, we still don't need to cross it off the list.
No, and the other thing too with any house is... So the stairs are what I look for, and today what I also look for is the sweet spot for an elevator,
right?
A residential elevator, and so obviously the size of the house will determine the ease of doing that. So a 1,200 square foot house likely isn't going to have a spot within the house itself that would allow for the installation of a stair lift. And again, we'll talk more about this, but bottom line is think of a square space 6 feet by 6 feet, and that's what the elevator is going to take up on the main floor, in the basement, and on the second floor if you have a 2-story house. So you have to find a spot that would actually take up that kind of space on all levels of the house. So smaller houses, we're usually talking about an addition, at least an elevator shaft addition, and bigger houses we can often find a good spot within the house itself. And in some of your 2-story houses, older 80s style, 90s style 2-story houses often have fairly generous entrance foyers that sometimes have the 90 degree or 180 degree stairs, curving stairs, but there's usually space somewhere in there that you can maybe add the elevator. But a 2-story is really tricky because it has to be that, again, that sweet spot where it's not, landing somewhere inappropriately in the basement. So you got to find that right spot in the basement that's also right on the main floor and then also right on the second floor. So it is, more often than not, I'm adding an elevator to a house because the original design wasn't designed to think about the elevator in the beginning.
Okay. So if we've checked off entry and we've checked off vertical movement, what's the third thing you look for?
And then the third thing and the biggest thing is the bathroom. So most homes don't design bathrooms that have any real generous space. So they're relatively tight. Your typical, and again, I'm talking sort of before into the 80s, I guess, but your typical bathroom is a 5-foot by 8-foot space. So that's enough to accommodate a bathtub, a toilet, and a sink. And usually like a 2-foot 4-inch or 2-foot 6-inch door. And so those bathrooms are near impossible to modify in any meaningful way for somebody who uses a wheelchair. So as soon as you have something like that, now we're talking about moving walls. So we've got structural issues. You've probably got some plumbing issues. And if you have like the house I grew up in was a 3-bedroom, 1,100 square foot bungalow. So the only way to increase the size of the bathroom was to either add on or to take over one of the bedrooms. So now your 3-bedroom house becomes a 2-bedroom. And for me, that's not a big deal. But I know that I'm in the 10% there. 90% of your home buyer does not want to give up the idea of being able to resell the house for as a 3-bedroom, not a 2-bedroom, because
right.
They just are convinced that they're not going to get their money back if it's considered a 2-bedroom house.
Right.
So that really does, the market really does influence the way we think and buy, which I find a little bit odd, but especially when you're somebody with a disability, the value of living in a house that makes your life easier is just a number that I can't even determine, right? And the idea that you would live in a house that doesn't accommodate you very well because one day you think you might sell it just seems like not the way I would approach it anyway, let's put it that way.
Right. So we need to think more of investing in our lives and a little bit less about investing in our pockets.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I suppose,
I might use that.
Okay, so...
Yeah, I think that's, sometimes get in projects that are not always happy to start with anyway. You meet somebody who has MS or even, to me, even worse is, and I'm trying to be careful with my language, but ALS is one of those conditions that I just think would be devastating to hear you have it, right? You're not given a real good chance that you're going to live, beyond 2 years. Your brain does not change. You're smart as ever, but your body just shuts down. And often I do work for people that are diagnosed with ALS, and we talk about renovations, and they keep saying resale. They keep talking about resale, and I'm like, if it was me, I wouldn't care. Like I just would build this thing to accommodate my needs, because if I'm only going to get 2 years, I'm going to live those 2 years as best I can, and I don't want to be thinking about compromising that for the sake of resale. I certainly don't tell my clients that. I don't give my own opinions on that, but I do find it personally. I find it a bit of an odd way to approach it.
I talk to a lot of people these days who are older individuals, sometimes a couple, sometimes a widow or a widower, and they still live in the original family home, which is large, and it's just becoming too much to manage. I'm sure that houses like that are 2-bedroom with some sort of a barrier-free entry or a modified entry of some sort, there would be a market for that.
I think so, for sure. It's again, a lot of people as they age, they just keep trying to adapt, and there's that word again, right? Adapt to the house that they have, and they, and generations are different, but I think the generation of my own parents are like fiercely independent, just almost are in denial that they're getting older, and so they just continue to use stairs, and they don't want to add grab bars to their bathroom because they don't want their friends and neighbors to see that they might be having some issues. And I'm like,
right.
You're 85, like we know.
Well, isn't it better? Isn't it better to have a grab bar? It's better to have a grab bar than a rollator. I mean, if you want to out yourself, if you will, you don't want to injure yourself in the process of trying to do your life.
It's true. And again, we've got to get to that point where we all get over that, because people don't think that other people are going to say negative things about them having grab bars in their bathroom if people haven't done that to them. So, I mean, they're not making this stuff up. So, obviously there have been friends and family that might have said something, oh, you got a grab bar in your bathroom. Are you having issues, So it is again sort of a bit of a cultural thing, right? And it just all goes back to the way we address and think about accessibility and people with disabilities. And that certainly in my time has the attitudinal change has been quite dramatic from when I was young to today. But we're still not quite there yet, right? And
right.
We have to stop thinking that people with disabilities are somehow broken and in a bad place, because they're not.
Right.
They just have. We all have challenges in our own ways, and so for somebody in a wheelchair, maybe some of the things are a little bit harder, but they're just made increasingly harder because we don't build it to accommodate them.
Well, my young grandson would probably benefit from a grab bar to get in and out of the bathtub. He's little, and just having that steadiness. But also allow me to point out that there are some really beautiful grab bars out there now. And I think that's a function of the market saying, look, we don't want to look like an institution. So the more beautiful grab bars that come in, bronzed oil and black, I mean, they can match your decor. They're just gorgeous, and they are out there. People just need to not need them in a hurry, like to come home from rehab, for instance, because let's say they fell and they had to go to rehab and they can't come home until their bathroom is adapted. Well, then it's hurry, hurry, hurry. If you prepare for this, well, first of all, you may not have fallen if you had a grab bar.
yeah, exactly.
But if you have the time to prepare for it, you can find some really beautiful stuff. So
it's so true. And the market, our market here in Canada has really been driven by what's happening in the States as well. So
right.
You've got a population more than all of Canada of people over 65 in the United States. So there really is a big market. And when it comes to things like grab bars, complementing, so you can, you look at bathroom accessories and you can get a matching grab bar to your toilet paper holder and your towel bar and all that. Everything just all looks the same and looks really nice. That does make it a big difference for people, for sure. And that definitely is coming because the market is, especially in the States, is quite large, right? And people that are sort of 60 years old and older have been driving the market for a really long time. So it is that it's still back to that supply and demand, right?
Right.
That's dictating it, but it hasn't really. Again, the attitude is, well, we'll find all these adaptive features to add to the house the way it was built. Whereas my approach would be, let's design the house so we don't necessarily need grab bars everywhere, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's a real big thing, and a kind of an attitude that we need to change, which takes both sides, the builders and the buying public, to both buy into that idea that this is good and it will have good resale value and it'll, all that kind of, all those sorts of things that influence why we buy what we buy.
Right. So we are going to do a series of 3 short podcasts that will be released following this one. One on the entry to a house, one on vertical movement within a house, and one on bathrooms. So Ron is going to talk to us about the kinds of specific things that home buyers and realtors, and gosh, maybe even builders should be looking at, and including the questions that you should ask during the search. Is there anything else you want to add, Ron, before we wrap this one up?
No, I don't think so. I think that's, I'm looking forward to that, actually. I just spent I've been spending a lot of time with a particular builder here in Edmonton that we've been doing quite a bit of work together, and, we're building a new infill house that's just nearing completion, and another new house within an architecturally controlled community in kind of the deeper southwest. And he was just mentioning to me, which this is great to sort of finish with, and then we can carry on our conversation in the other podcast. But he was just saying, like, the infill house is designed for this idea of aging in place. So this idea of being a home that you are anticipating 20 years, 30 years down the road. The other house has been designed specifically for somebody who uses a power chair. And so for the builder who is not completely new to all of this, but is kind of experiencing these new home builds for the kind of first time, he was just sharing with me how the approach from each of the clients, and I designed both houses, so each of the clients, just what they want and what they are willing to kind of do in terms of, again, that both will have no-step entrances, both have elevators, both have wet room bathrooms. But again, just the style and approach that they have to ultimately to the build, I think is really interesting, because now we're really getting into the depths of now we have home buyers and homeowners that are a little bit more savvy and understanding of the subject. But even then, working through all of that is somewhat of a challenge. And lastly, just making sure all the sub-trades are on site too. Like,
right.
For the builder, that's a huge challenge. It's just, you have hundreds of people coming to that site over the course of building it. And to have everybody on the same page is just such a tremendous challenge.
We had a bit of a discussion about the sub-trades in our previous podcast around the history of accessibility, so people can go back and have a listen to that. We talked about it in a bit more depth. But, okay, well, join us again for our 3 specific podcasts on these various subjects of entry, vertical movement, and bathrooms. And until then, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Real Life Renos, the podcast, is a production of Reno Studios, executive produced by Karen Brown. This is Real Life theme, music, and lyrics by Jane Carmichael, recorded at Swamp Songs Recording Studio in Lucan, Ontario. Engineered by Matt Weston. Thank you for tuning in.